Chapter 16. Mishpocheh and Mishegoss. On Sundays my father slept late, and I was instructed not to wake him. He'd worked hard all week. I read the Sunday funnies, played the radio softly while his bedroom door was closed, and waited impatiently for him to stir. Sundays we went for rides in the car, and that was something I really looked forward to. Sometimes we just drove through the picturesque Boston suburbs and out into the country. Ice cream was always a part of the adventure. About halfway through, at small shops we happened across, or one of the orange-roofed Howard Johnsons, which seemed to be everywhere, my dad would alert us with, "Does anyone want some ICE?" He spelled it out like that, and it was glorious when he said it. For a special treat, we'd stop for an early supper. But what I really enjoyed was going to one of my aunt's houses for dinner. My Aunt Teresa was married to my dad's brother Abe, who died when he was only 42. My Uncle Mickey and my Aunt Sarah lived with my grandmother, Bubby, after her husband died, and with their daughters, my close double cousins, Minda and Harriet. The female members of the clan alternated making Sunday dinners. When Minda was a baby, we always planned to arrive at bath time. After a while, it became kind of a ritual. "Hold the bath," my mother would say to Sarah on the phone. "We're on our way." Their beautiful old house in Newton Center, where we stayed when I was bar mitzvahed, and where Harriet married, had 3 floors, a basement, and a big front porch. The 3rd floor contained a small bedroom for my Uncle Fred when he was there, and the rest of the space was for storage. Amid the clutter, there was a wind-up Victrola, which played scratchy Caruso records, 78s of course. An inexpensive, well-worn violin preserved in a case with a broken catch, and a mass of white wicker furniture. I loved that dingy 3rd floor with all its mysteries and discoveries. My father said the violin had been his brother Abe's, and that he'd played beautifully. When we visited, I'd disappear up the narrow stairs and pry open the creaking inner sanctum door to sit for hours on the wicker, holding the violin and listening to Caruso. My Bubby was my father's mother, and as a child, I felt her daunting influence. Like my other grandparents, she had come over from the old country, and the experiences she'd endured had not only strengthened, but also hardened her. She spoke Yiddish to everyone, and seemed formidable, but obviously, she doted on Minda and Harriet. Later on, when my brother Roy and Minda began playing the piano, and we were trotted out to perform, she always watched Minda attentively. When Roy played, she said in Yiddish, my mother translated for me, with some annoyance, "Look how cute Minda is," watching Roy play. There's no doubt that Bubby was the matriarch, and Sarah was a close second. She could be demanding and difficult, and she and my mother had apparently worked out a kind of truce, or at least a ceasefire, for my father's sake. When my Uncle Fred, Sarah, Abe, and Dad's younger brother, fell in love with the gentle girl Annie at Juilliard, Sarah insisted they keep the unhappy news from her mother, who she was certain would either promptly stick her head in the oven or throw herself out the window. By the time I found out in my teens, I concluded that Sarah was more upset than Bubby would have been. And when they finally told my grandmother, she apparently took it very well. In fact, she gave Anne a special ring that my Aunt Sarah may have had her eye on. I suspected Bubby'd known all along, but I was just a kid, and no one paid attention to me. Anyway, nobody's head went into anyone's oven. Anne proved to be a loving and devoted wife to my Uncle Fred. They both became opera singers and lived in Italy and Switzerland for most of their married life. Anne was quite famous for a while, singing in her prime at various opera houses as Anna de Cavalieri. Her name was Anne McKnight. When Fred's health began to fail in his late 70s, she nursed him selflessly with her tender care. Dad's father, my grandfather, Max, had been a men's tailor. I remember him a little. He was short and dapper, and I think he had a beard. My mother's father, Hyman, was a woman's tailor, and he made beautiful little dresses for my cousins, Minda and Harriet. When Max died, I remember that Bubby had a small corner grocery store with sawdust on the floor, a penny candy counter, and a sour pickle barrel. One of my father's favorite, sobering anecdotes described her crossing the streetcar tracks in front of the store, in the snow, to get a small change for a customer. For sure, the intermarried families were close. And when we were together on those memorable Sundays, there were always people around. But one day I found myself in the kitchen for the first time alone with Bubby, and I was nervous. She was moving about, preparing a meal and talking to me in Yiddish, as she always did. And as I always did, I kept saying, "Yes, Bubby," whenever she paused. One of my responses must have been totally inappropriate, because she suddenly asked in perfect English, "Did you understand what I said?" I gulped in dismay. "No, Bubby." "Then why didn't you tell me?" "I'm sorry, Bubby, I didn't know you spoke English." I thought we became closer after that, and sometimes I even detected a sense of humor. Years later, when I was 21 and Deborah was 20, and we were about to be married, we learned that Bubby was coming to LA from Boston for the wedding, and to meet Deborah for the first time. Since I was the oldest grandchild and the first to marry, that would be a momentous occasion, which everyone looked forward to, hoping for Bubby's approval. They needn't have worried. The meeting was cordial. My Bubby embraced Deborah immediately and said in her perfect English, "I like his taste better than yours." That phrase summoned up her whole personality. The wedding reception took place in the home of our good friends Charles and Peggy Jack, the parents of Deborah's maid of honor, Joan, who became Melissa's godmother, and her brothers Ian and Malcolm. I once wrote a poem celebrating the Jack's anniversary, which included, "Front to front and back to back, the dual-purpose name is Jack." Our reception was a very happy occasion, with close family and friends from school, and there were wonderful moments. The one I remember best was when I wandered into the kitchen and found dear Peggy hovering over the trays of hors d'oeuvres, picking out what she suspected was ham so my grandmother wouldn't notice the caterer's oversight. Even if she'd known, I don't think Bubby would have put her head in the oven.